My name is Evelyn Carter, and I never thought I would be sitting in my own living room, staring across the polished oak table at my brand new son-in-law and a lawyer I had never seen before. Outside the window, the waves from the Atlantic slapped against the rocks the way they had every morning since my husband passed away, steady and relentless. Inside, though, my chest felt anything but steady. Michael leaned forward, his tie too perfectly knotted, his smile just wide enough to look rehearsed. "Evelyn, Laura and I think it's time we put your assets into a family trust," he said smoothly, as if the words were harmless. Laura, my only daughter, sat beside him with her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked at me with that mixture of love and impatience that only a daughter convinced she knows better can carry. I wanted to laugh, maybe even shout. Assets. He meant the $30 million in beachfront properties my late husband left in my care. For years, I had kept that truth close, protecting it like a secret heartbeat. Not because I didn't trust my daughter, but because I knew the world had a way of sniffing out weakness. And Michael, this polished stranger who had only just slipped a ring on Laura's finger, already smelled blood. My palms pressed against my knees under the table. I forced my voice calm. "A family trust," I repeated, letting the words roll bitter on my tongue. That's an awfully big step for people who haven't even finished unwrapping their wedding gifts. Michael chuckled, too loud, too quick. Laura shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting between us. "Mom, he's only trying to protect you," she said, her tone soft but edged with that familiar frustration, the one that cut deeper than she ever knew. Protect me. I nearly flinched. At 68, after burying a husband, raising a daughter, and managing every storm life had thrown my way, I was suddenly the fragile one in their eyes. The room felt smaller, the air heavy with unspoken accusations that I was old, vulnerable, incapable of making my own decisions. As Michael spread the papers across my table, my throat tightened. This wasn't protection, this was intrusion. And I knew then the silence I had kept about my husband's fortune was no longer safe. And that night, long after they left, I sat by the window listening to the ocean, realizing the real battle wasn't about money at all. It was about whether I still had the right to steer my own life. The morning after that uneasy meeting, I brewed my coffee stronger than usual, as if the bitterness could steady my thoughts. The sun had just begun to rise over the water, casting a pale orange glow on the horizon. I stood at the kitchen counter staring at the steam rising from my cup, wondering how long it would be before Michael tried again. He wasn't the type of man who gave up easily. I could sense that much. Laura called later that day. Her voice was careful, as though she was tiptoeing around broken glass. "Mom, Michael only wants to help. He knows how complicated estate planning can get. He's worried you might get taken advantage of." I let her words sink in. Taken advantage of? I nearly laughed out loud, though nothing about the situation was funny. For decades, I had managed property contracts, handled tax filings, negotiated with city inspectors and difficult tenants. Yet in my daughter's eyes, one charming man in a tailored suit had suddenly become the expert. I answered quietly, "Sweetheart, I appreciate your concern, but I don't need Michael or anyone else handling what your father entrusted to me." She sighed, and I could hear the impatience hidden in her exhale. "You've been alone a long time. Mom, maybe it's time to let someone share the responsibility." Then she rushed off the phone, leaving me with the ache of a conversation unfinished. That night, I pulled an old leather file box from the closet. Inside were deeds, contracts, tax returns, all the paper bones of the empire my husband and I had built. My fingers traced his handwriting on the margins of a property ledger. his neat notes about renovation costs and projected rental income. I felt his presence in every careful calculation, every signed page. The thought of handing those papers to Michael made my stomach twist. The ocean was loud that evening, the tide higher than usual. I sat by the window, the box of documents open on the coffee table beside me. It wasn't only money Michael was circling. It was my independence, my identity, the last living proof that I was still capable of steering my own ship. As the waves crashed against the rocks, I realized silence would no longer protect me. If Michael was willing to bring lawyers into my home so soon, what would he do next? That thought hardened something inside me. By the time the moon rose, I knew I couldn't just sit and wait. I needed answers, and I knew exactly how to get them. 2 days later, I found myself driving into the heart of Boston, the city skyline gleaming in the late morning sun. I had made an appointment with a private investigator named Patrick Hale. His office sat above a narrow street where the scent of roasted coffee beans mixed with the noise of passing taxis. The building was old brick, weathered like the man himself. Patrick greeted me with a firm handshake and eyes that seemed to have seen too much. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You said you needed a background check?" he asked, motioning me toward a chair worn smooth from years of worried clients. "Yes," I said, my voice low. "My new son-in-law, Michael Turner." Patrick leaned back, scribbling the name onto a yellow pad. "Tell me what you suspect." I hesitated, ashamed that I sounded paranoid. But then I thought of Michael's smirk across my kitchen table. He wants control of my late husband's properties. He's been married to my daughter less than a month, and already he's pressing for a trust. Something doesn't sit right. Patrick nodded slowly. "I'll dig, but if there's dirt, you have to be ready to see it." I swallowed hard. "I'm ready." That night, I replayed the conversation with Laura in my head. When she stopped by to check on me, her tone was clipped. "Mom, you can't keep shutting Michael out. He's family now." I set down the tea I was holding. "Laura, family doesn't walk into my home with a lawyer the day after a wedding." Her eyes flashed. "He's looking out for us. For me. Why can't you see that?" The words stung deeper than I expected. Us. Me. Not you. Mom. For the first time, I wondered if Michael's charm had wrapped around her tighter than I realized. I tried to steady my voice. "Laura, I need you to trust that I can handle what your father left behind. This isn't about shutting anyone out. It's about protecting what's ours." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood. "Protecting or controlling? Sometimes I think you just don't want to let go." Then she walked out, leaving the door half open, the winter air rushing in behind her. I sat alone at the table, her words echoing. Maybe she was right about one thing. I didn't want to let go. But not for the reasons she imagined. And as the wind howled through that open door, I realized Michael had already begun to drive a wedge between us. The first week of Michael's sudden absence felt strangely quiet, almost too quiet. Laura called me daily at first, her voice lined with worry, insisting he was away on business. But each time she repeated the excuse, I heard the hesitation in her tone, as if she was trying to convince herself more than me. I kept my doubts to myself until Patrick called one evening. His voice was steady, professional, but edged with something grim. "Evelyn, your son-in-law has used more than one name in the past 10 years. He's registered under at least 3 different identities, and there are whispers of bankrupt ventures in Florida and Nevada." My stomach tightened. "Does Laura know?" Patrick paused. "I'd be careful how you tell her. People don't like hearing that the person they just married might not be who he claims to be." That night, when Laura stopped by, her face pale from sleepless nights, I decided to speak plainly. Honey, I've had Michael checked. He's hiding things, serious things. You deserve to know. Her eyes flared with hurt. You hired someone to spy on my husband? He's not who you think he is. Laura. He's changed his name. He's run from debts. She cut me off, her voice trembling with anger. No, Mom. You can't stand that I finally have someone. You've been alone for so long that you can't stand to see me loved. The accusation pierced through me, sharper than any knife. I reached for her hand, but she pulled back, tears brimming. You're trying to ruin this marriage before it even begins. Maybe you're the one I can't trust. Her words lingered in the air long after she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled on the wall. I sat in the silence, my heart heavy with the realization that the man I distrusted had succeeded in driving a wedge straight through the bond between mother and daughter. For the next few days, Michael remained gone, unreachable. No phone calls, no texts, no explanations. Laura stopped answering my messages. The distance between us grew, not just in miles, but in faith. And as the tide roared against the shoreline one stormy night, I felt the dread settle in my bones. Michael hadn't just disappeared, he was preparing for something. And whatever it was, it would strike at both my daughter and me. When Michael's absence stretched into the third week, I knew this wasn't a simple business trip. Something darker was moving beneath the surface. That's when Patrick suggested a meeting with someone who could help on a federal level. I agreed, though my heart raced at the thought. We met in a modest office building downtown, where the FBI kept a field unit. Special Agent Rivera introduced herself with a firm handshake, her sharp eyes scanning me as though she were taking my measure. Mrs. Carter, she said. Mr. Hale tells me you're concerned about financial manipulation tied to your son-in-law. I nodded. He's already pushed for a trust to access my late husband's properties. Now he's vanished, and my daughter refuses to see the danger. I need to know what he's planning before it's too late. Rivera leaned back, tapping a pen against her notepad. Men like Turner operate in patterns. They circle wealthy widows or heirs, gain access through marriage, then drain assets before vanishing. If he's resurfacing under new names, we need to be ready. Her words confirmed my fears. Still, I asked the question burning inside me. If I agree to bait him, set up some kind of deal, will it be legal? I won't risk putting myself in handcuffs. Rivera's expression softened, if only slightly. Massachusetts law requires both parties to consent to recordings. If you wear a wire without him knowing, it could get messy. But if we set up the right conditions, documents, escrow accounts, monitored meetings, we can catch him breaking the law himself. That's where he'll hang himself. I exhaled, a strange mixture of fear and relief. For the first time since Michael's smile slithered across my dining table, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. That night, Laura showed up at my door unexpectedly. Her cheeks were flushed, her coat damp from the drizzle. "Mom," she said, her voice cracking, "Michael called me. He says he's working on something big, and when it's done, we'll all be secure." "Why can't you just believe him?" I placed my hands gently on her shoulders. Because security built on lies isn't security at all. She pulled back, her eyes searching mine, torn between loyalty and doubt. I saw the battle playing across her face, but she said nothing more. She left in silence, the slam of the door echoing like a warning. I stood in the quiet afterward, gripping the edge of the counter. Whatever Michael was planning, the storm hadn't even started yet. Michael returned on a gray February afternoon, as if he had simply stepped out for groceries. Laura called me first, her voice a mixture of relief and irritation. "See, Mom, he's fine. He was just busy with negotiations. She didn't explain what kind of negotiations, and I didn't press. I knew better than to expect honesty. 2 days later, Michael himself appeared at my door. His smile was broader than ever, his suit sharper, his cologne almost suffocating. He carried a leather portfolio under his arm and walked in as though the house already belonged to him. "Evelyn," he said, settling into my armchair without invitation. "I've been structuring a family partnership that will safeguard your assets and multiply their value. I want you and Laura to be part of something bigger." I folded my arms. "Something bigger than the empire my husband and I already built?" He chuckled, unbothered. "Legacy should grow, not stagnate. I've lined up investors overseas. With your properties as collateral, we can expand into resorts, luxury condos, global opportunities." Every word was polished, persuasive, but underneath I heard the hunger. Patrick's research echoed in my mind. The aliases, the debts, the trail of vanished ventures. Michael wasn't building legacy. He was feeding on it. "I'd need full transparency," I said evenly. "Audited statements, escrow protections, independent oversight." For the first time, a flicker crossed his eyes, a tiny shadow behind the charm. "Of course," he replied, too quickly. "We'll handle all of that." Later that night, Agent Rivera reviewed the draft documents Michael had left behind. She pointed to a clause buried in legal jargon. "If you sign this, he gains management rights the moment you become incapacitated. That means if you're in the hospital for a single night, he controls everything." The blood in my veins turned cold. It wasn't just about swindling money. It was about power over my very life. The next day, Laura stormed into my kitchen. "Michael says you're stalling, that you don't trust him. Why are you sabotaging us?" Her eyes shone with hurt, but underneath I saw fear. She wanted to believe him, but cracks had begun to show. I touched her hand gently. "I'm not sabotaging you, Laura. I'm saving us." Her lips pressed into a trembling line. She didn't answer, but she didn't pull away either. And for the first time, I sensed she was beginning to wonder if I might be right. The meeting was set for a quiet Saturday afternoon at my smaller property in Carmel, a place Michael didn't even know I cherished for its solitude. Agent Rivera and 2 others parked discreetly down the road, watching without interfering. My stomach twisted with every tick of the clock as I waited, wondering if I was about to step into a trap. Michael arrived first, his stride confident, portfolio in hand again. But this time, he wasn't alone. A tall woman in her 50s followed him inside, dressed in a tailored coat and carrying herself with the poise of someone who had spent her life in boardrooms. "Evelyn," Michael said with that same infuriating smile, "this is Veronica Miles. She has first-hand experience working with me." I stiffened. The name had already surfaced in Patrick's reports. She was supposed to be a victim, a woman he drained and left behind. Yet when Veronica extended her hand, her grip was firm, her gaze unwavering. "I know what you've heard," she said before I could speak. "But the truth is, Michael helped me triple my portfolio. I took risks, yes, but they were mine to take. People call me a victim because it's easier to believe an older widow couldn't possibly choose to gamble with her own money." Her words stung. They mirrored the accusations Laura had thrown at me, controlling, incapable of letting go. I glanced at Michael, who stood quietly, as though confident that Veronica's presence spoke louder than anything he could say. I asked carefully, "So you don't feel used? Lied to?" Veronica shook her head. I felt alive. For once, I wasn't treated like fragile glass. I was treated as someone who still had the power to decide. That's worth more than security. Her answer left me silent. I had come prepared to see another casualty, a mirror of what might happen to me. Instead, I found myself staring at a woman who had chosen risk and wore it like armor. Michael leaned closer, his voice low. "Evelyn, you can keep resisting, or you can join us. The choice is yours." The choice. My chest tightened. For weeks I had fought to prove he was a predator. But what if the battle wasn't against him at all? What if it was against the chains of fear I had wrapped around myself? I left that meeting with more questions than answers, and the sound of Veronica's words echoing in my head. It was mine to take. The following week, I asked Michael to meet me again, this time at a downtown law office I had rented for the day. The walls smelled of old leather and ink, and a polished mahogany table stretched between us. I wanted him to believe he was stepping into his victory, but in truth, every detail of that room had been set to trap him. Agent Rivera and her team observed from an adjoining office through a concealed feed, silent but vigilant. Michael entered with his usual swagger, portfolio in hand, confidence radiating off him. "So," he said smoothly, "have we come to our senses?" I slid a folder across the table. "I've reviewed your proposal. I'm willing to test it, but under conditions." His eyes flickered with greed. "Conditions?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Every dollar moves through an escrow account. All transactions require joint signatures, and I want a forensic accountant overseeing the books. Transparency isn't optional." For a moment he froze, then forced a smile. "Of course, Evelyn. Whatever makes you comfortable." But as he signed the preliminary documents, I saw the hesitation in the way his pen lingered. He was hiding something. He always was. Later that night, Patrick called. "We've uncovered discrepancies in the documents he filed. Bank statements don't match, and he's inflated his net worth with forged letters of credit. That's fraud, plain and simple." I closed my eyes, relief and dread colliding inside me. We finally had him on paper, not just suspicion. The next day, Laura confronted me. She had seen Michael pacing in their apartment, furious after learning I insisted on escrow. "He says you don't trust him. Mom, he says you're suffocating us." I reached for her hand. "Laura, love isn't suffocated by accountability. If he's the man you believe, he has nothing to fear from transparency." She bit her lip, tears shining in her eyes. For the first time, she didn't argue. She just whispered, "I don't know what to believe anymore." Michael's charm was cracking, his polished mask slipping under the weight of his own lies. And as I prepared for the storm to come, I knew one truth with certainty. Predators don't fear rejection. They fear exposure. And exposure was exactly what was waiting for him. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of my main house, watching the Atlantic crash against the rocks below. The salt air filled my lungs, sharp and cleansing, as if the ocean itself was washing away the residue of those turbulent weeks. Michael was gone, caught in the net of his own making. The forged statements and false letters of credit unraveled under scrutiny. Each thread tugged loose until the entire illusion collapsed. Rivera's team had what they needed, and though I never saw the cuffs close around his wrists, I knew he was finished. Predators survive on shadows, and we had dragged him into the light. Laura sat beside me at the table, a cup of tea warming her hands. The exhaustion on her face had softened into something gentler, a humility that comes only after hard truths settle in. She finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "I thought I was protecting you, but maybe I was just afraid of losing him." I reached across the table, brushing my fingers against hers. We both learned something. Love can blind us, but trust, real trust, means facing the truth, even when it hurts. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes, and for the first time in months, the distance between us began to close. The properties my husband left had grown in value, not by miracles, but by strategy. I sold one oceanfront parcel at the peak of the market, reinvested into stable holdings, and refinanced another property at favorable rates. When the dust settled, the portfolio stood at $42 million stronger than before. Every decision was mine, signed with my own hand. But the money was never the heart of it. What mattered was reclaiming the certainty that age had not stripped me of choice. Veronica's words still lingered. It was mine to take. For me, the lesson was simpler. The right to steer my own ship was not something to be surrendered, no matter how many voices insisted I was too fragile to hold the wheel. As the tide rose that evening, I realized revenge hadn't been about punishing Michael. It had been about refusing to let him, or anyone else, write the ending of my story. I raised my glass of wine toward the horizon, the waves glowing under the setting sun, and whispered to the memory of my husband, "I'm still at the helm, and I always will be." Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.